On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Krystal. And Krystal was raised by an abusive, splitting mother. It's a story of intergenerational trauma, nitpicking, body issues, existence, moving goalposts, parentification, and survival. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Krystal. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking, and thank you for being here. And if you want to be a guest like Krystal is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all. And either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. And we do have a content warning for this episode, as we do mention animal abuse and physical abuse in this episode. So that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Krystal's story. And this is a story that focuses on how the child, Krystal, becomes the target of her mother, and the ammunition being used is the hurt that her mom felt after her dad left the picture. And he was barely in the picture to begin with, but for the rest of Krystal's life, Krystal was going to be the reflection of this man to her mom. And there was nothing Krystal could do to stop her mom from acting this way. And it's a sad story, but it's also interesting when you're looking at it from a relational trauma, intergenerational trauma point of view, everything that has occurred, and all these little mechanizations that go into who makes someone and what makes trauma, and that person taking out their trauma on someone else. And sadly, it was Krystal who was a child at this time and was the victim of all of this. So a big thank you to Krystal for being here today. And I know you're going to be validating a lot of people out there. You're going to get validated by her, everyone who's gone through this as well, for everyone who has gone through this. So Krystal, a big thank you. Now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Krystal, the floor is now yours.
This is my story about my mother and I and our relationship and everything like that. Basically, my mother was one of 6 kids and they were all girls except for the youngest, which was a boy. And so, of course, as it is sometimes in certain families, like the boy was favored. So, and they didn't have a lot of money, and her father was an alcoholic. So, her mother was a nice woman, but she kind of was a doormat for, she kind of let people get away with things that they shouldn't have got away with. So she basically let people walk all over her. She was too nice in a way. My mother's parents really didn't divorce until she was in her teens. So she had, a so-called normal, mother, father, siblings type of relationship until her teenage years. Regarding that, it seems like with my aunts and uncles, it seems like they all have some kind of issues related to the way that they were brought up. My uncle, we'll just call him Fred. He dealt with a lot of problems with drug addiction and stuff like that. And has basically spent a little bit more time inside of jail than outside of jail. Her other sister, Sue, which was the oldest girl, I'll just say Sue is the type of person who pretty much always thinks that she is right, and she's always looking for accolades and rewards and praise from other people. And I don't know whether it's because she didn't get it growing up or she felt that she wasn't good enough because she was a girl, or it could have been that. The next oldest, I'll just call her Gina. And a lot of times she deals with like a lot of issues with telling the truth. It's like she's kind of a chronic liar, and I believe that's because who she was as a child wasn't really accepted. And so her other sister, Paula, is a bit paranoid, and she always thinks that the worst people are out to get her, people are against her, all that kind of stuff. So Rita, she kind of developed a fantasy world in her own mind, and she kind of sees things that are not there literally. Really, when it comes to mental illness, she probably has the most strongly diagnosed mental illness. Her and Rita had enough sense to not really bring anybody else into their dysfunction. They did not have any children. So I guess they knew they had too many issues and didn't bring anybody here. But as far as the rest of my aunts and uncles, they did have kids, and I could write a book on, what has happened with those kids and grandkids. But, as far as my mother, which is one we were kind of really talking about here, she's the type of person who exaggerates a lot and kind of makes things out to be worse than what they are. It could be one incident and she has already blown it out into something major. And she also is the type that seeks validation a lot, even though she'll say she doesn't care what people thinks. She will seek validation a lot so that she's always kind of helping people, even though they really don't need the help or even if they don't want the help. Like, I remember when my aunt, she moved and she had left her dog behind, and the dog was staying with one of her son's friends. And so my mother would actually take like 3 buses to go over there and to take care of the dog and to bring the dog water and food and all of that, even though the friend the dog was staying with had arms and could easily just give the dog food and water himself, and he did. But my mother caught 3 buses over there instead of, dealing with her own life or her own poor financial situation. She went through that to take care of someone else's dog. And on the surface, it sounds is sweet, but in a way is insane. Like, this dog really did not need you, but you need to be needed. That's kind of how I felt about it. And after that happened, that was one of the cracks that I saw through, that mentally she had some issues. And maybe she really wasn't the arbiter of all truth. And maybe I should take the things that she says a little less personally because she really doesn't even have it together herself. And, I sympathize and everything with her upbringing, my aunts and uncles and all that. But at the end of the day, kind of responsible for ourselves. If my mother had been a teen parent or something, maybe I would have a bit more sympathy. But for someone who was basically 30 years old having her first child, I mean, get therapy, do something rather than just keep passing on the dysfunction.
So before we continue, I just want to say, first, thank you for giving a really good description of each one of your aunts and uncles. What do you think went on inside that home? Because each one of these children are in their own role, of how they had to survive inside that house as best they could, and each developed their own thing. And it sounds like maybe these kids can get along with each other, and then sometimes they won't, but they're each so individual here with what their issue is, probably based on where they were in the standing, or the how they what era they were born in. What do you think like happened inside that house for at least your mom to become her version of herself after seeing her sisters and her brother? Because the oldest sister, my inkling for her would be, because of patriarchal standards or whatever, she becomes the one that has to take care of everyone. So she's kind of like a second mom in a way, and is like, no one's taking care of me, I'm taking care of everyone else, so everyone's gonna listen to me. Then resentment might grow from other kids that, like, you're not my mom, and things will fall in line or from that point on.
Oh, you make a good point. Actually, with my oldest aunt, she kind of is like that. It's basically like, I'm the oldest. Everything is supposed to go my way. It's all about me. I'm blah, blah, blah. She's kind of like that. And I believe that is because her mother was quite sickly. And then the father, to be fair, they're only 24 hours in a day and he had to work. So I believe a lot of that did fall upon her. You know what I'm saying? And so she does kind of have this attitude, oh, I'm older, everything has to go my way. You have to listen to me, you have to respect me, you have to do this. And that's probably why her and I have butt heads a lot, because she really is not used to anyone younger than her telling her no. And that's pretty much all there is to it with that. Like I said, I do sympathize, but at the end of the day, we're kind of responsible for not passing on any more dysfunction and, dealing with our own issues without messing up someone else's life. It's about what was going on in that household. Being that the father, which was my grandfather, was an alcoholic, and he was pretty violent as toward, like, a lot of times they have animals that he would be violent towards them. And of course, there's a lot of screaming, yelling, name calling, all that kind of stuff like that. So that's pretty much what went on in their house. And I do believe my mother with regards to that, because when it comes to alcoholics, that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, because your mom, the description you had of your mom, you know, always exaggerating, making things out worse than they are, and helping people. Your mom's trying to be seen. You know, it just sounds like, if she's exaggerates, maybe someone will listen to this story. If things are really bad, maybe someone will listen to my story. If I help someone, maybe they'll acknowledge that I exist. You know, it's like your mom is trying to figure out how people will notice that she exists in the world, and she, I guess, going forward, will be stunted into, I exist in this world, and you as a child of this person, are unfortunately, will become second to this person, still needing to show people that she exists and that she matters in some sort of way. Fair?
Oh, yes, yes, I do believe that. It's like, being that the boy was favored, I believe she did. I guess she does need to feel important and to feel seen and to feel like she is doing something good in the world and all of that, which I can sympathize with. I can.
And when you come from an alcoholic, that person's kind of taking center stage, even though they're the adult. And then if you start having siblings who have drug issues, and that could become part of what family is dealing with, then their thing is, these people are being recognized for things not going well for them, and that they need help. So your mom might dabble in, like, I'm not doing well over here, as a way, like, oh, things are really bad, making things as bad as they can, because what's being shown to her is when people are in distress, people recognize those people.
Exactly. And even after they grew up, my uncle with all the drug issues and going to jail, and his kids not being treated right by their mother, and blah blah blah. So that caused a lot of, trouble in the family, a lot of turmoil in the family, even after they were adults. And so even as an adult, he is still sucking up all the attention. So I guess the girls are just out there in the wind doing what they need to do to get some sort of recognition and some sort of validation that they matter. And I do sympathize with that. I do.
So eventually, your mom meets your dad. So take it from here.
Basically, they meet, they date, they get married, she gets pregnant. That's basically, what happens. And from the way it is told to me, he was happy at first about the pregnancy and all of that. But I don't know, as things went further along in the pregnancy and it became more of a reality that he was going to have a child, I guess he felt that he didn't want children, or he felt that he wasn't ready for children, or whatever, what have you. Maybe he didn't want them at all, and deep down, not right then, but ever, because even after they broke up, he never had any kids. So I'm guessing maybe he didn't want kids at all. He just kind of rolled with it because that's what society says that you're supposed to want. So basically, there were a lot of arguments during the pregnancy about, what he was supposed to do once the kid was born, and all that kind of stuff like that. There were a lot of arguments, and it was mainly verbal, but at times it would get physical. I guess about 10% of the time it would get physical. And, she left, and basically he didn't want to pay child support. And she said that, okay, well, if you're not going to pay child support, you're not going to get to see the kid. You don't get to have it both ways. And so the courts get involved and all of that kind of stuff happened. And I do sympathize with what happened. And, I do believe what she said about him not paying child support and all that, because that is public record that he did not pay the child support. And, that's public record. I don't really even know him like that, even when he was alive. So that is all I do believe her with that. So yeah, he is a deadbeat. That is undeniable right there. But at the same time, even though he's dead wrong, she let it consume her entire life. Like, most people have gotten divorced or dumped at one point in their life, you know what I'm saying? And at some point you got to move past this human experience, especially when you have a child depending on you. You know, there was really not a single day growing up that I did not have to hear about that man. Like, it's just like, let's say we were watching a TV program or whatever. Oh, that man looks like your dad. Let's say we were like in a waiting room and a woman, there's a man and a woman there, and she feels that the man is not helping out enough with the child. See, that's how they do you. Your daddy was like that. There was not a single day growing up that I did not hear something about that deadbeat. And to be fair, I'm kind of glad that my mother really never got involved in a romantic relationship seriously after this, because they would have all had to live in his shadow. The man would have had to, the man couldn't even breathe loud. See, Lee did that. She would have somehow made the new guy live in the old guy's shadow. And to be fair, that is not fair to him. So it was a good thing that she never really did have a serious romantic relationship after her marriage was over.
And here's a situation where your mom has found someone who might have seen her, and recognized her and that she existed, and then it's gone. And in the process of that person being gone, my assumption here is that it hits this real big core wound of hers. Here's someone that's not family that I thought was this person to me, and now they're gone. And now I'm going to be so deep in this trauma that it already existed that this person is now reinforced, that this is the sole focus of, this loss that I have, that this person has wronged me. This person that may have validated me briefly has done this, and now they're going to be that. And on top of that, you are now part of her life, and she's, who knows what her thought process is, but you are now part of him. You are part of this story going forward, attached to what he looks like, who he was. You're a reminder of this to her every single day. And instead of being a child to your mom, you are the victim of all of your mom's future anger towards this person, possibly the abandonment of whatever, of all of that. And also at the same time, as we'll discuss, you also, as your survival mechanism, part of it is to be her parent, to validate her existence, that she exists, and that all of those things. So there's this part of you that's surviving to make sure that she's doing okay, and that this part of her that needs to be validated is validated, which isn't a child's job. And at the same time, you also become the victim of what she needs as well, which is someone to exaggerate things about, someone to like scapegoat, and someone who she might say she does all these things for, even though, your mom, that she's trying to portray herself in this way, taking on this role that is a relational trauma from when she grew up. So I was pretty long winded there. So I guess, this is where, like, for you, three stories kind of intersect, which is your mom's trauma, the parentification, and you're not being taken care of and being told that you're bad. So I guess from here on out, talk about all of these points kind of going forward.
Okay, a big thing with me is that a big issue with me growing up was basically my weight. Basically, let's say I would go to the doctor for a checkup or whatever like that, or shots or whatever they do, well child checkups or whatever they call them. And so basically, the doctors would basically tell her like, "Hey, this girl is overweight. This is not healthy." And let's say I was about 5 years old, and basically my mother would just make all of these excuses. Oh, her father was a big guy. She can't help that. I can't help that. Blah, blah, blah. And then at this time, we were living with two of my aunts, the two aunts that don't have kids. We were living with them. So it was basically those two aunts, my mom, and then me. So basically, we were all living together. She would get home, she would complain to them, oh, everything that's wrong with her is Lee's stuff, blah, blah, blah. But then she would proceed to like overfeed me. I guess I don't know whether there was a food insecurity issue with her as a child. So she would proceed to give me too much juice, too large portions, feed me too often, blah, blah, blah. And then she would get an attitude if I didn't want to finish it or couldn't finish it or whatever. I'm guessing, you know. So basically, at about the age of 7 or 8, I weighed about 135 to 138 pounds, which is, it probably is more than what I weigh now. So basically, when you're overweight, there's a lot of bullying that goes with that. And of course, she just kept coming up with all these excuses about genes this and genes that. And I understand that genes do have a lot to do with things, but if you're not, you should at least try something. And if genetics really had something to do with it, I would still be overweight. So, at least give the person or the child a chance instead of just immediately just defaulting to genes and having a defeatist attitude about something. So, as an adult, I ended up having to get like skin removal surgery and a tummy tuck and a thigh lift and all that. And soon I may have to get an arm lift because of all the excess skin left over from when I did lose weight. And there's a lot of physical and mental pain that wouldn't have to be if she would just stop whining about her ex-husband, stop seeing her ex-husband everywhere, and do and just take the advice that the doctors and the professionals were giving to her. But of course, she knew more than the professionals. Is once again, she knows everything, and everything is Lee's fault. It could be a storm. Somehow he did it. I know I'm exaggerating right now. It could be like storm clouds rolling. I'm sure he's doing it. I know I'm exaggerating when I said about the storm, but that's how I feel about it. And I'm like, these doctors are telling you what is these doctors are telling you this is not healthy. When does your child's health come before saying, being able to sit back and say, that's not my fault. That's my ex-husband's fault. I told you all, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but this is wild.
So you're 8 years old. A lot of this stuff's going on, 8 to 10 years old. Are you able to notice what your mom is doing during this time? Like, are you able to see that your mom is giving you too much food, and like that what she's saying isn't adding up? That like, yeah, my dad, it was a bigger guy, but like you're eating a lot. And did you ever say anything to her about that, or say anything to other people about that?
It took me a longer time to see it actually, because you got to keep in mind, like from toddlerhood up until that point, it had been drilled into my head that it was genetic. There was nothing I could do about it. It is what it is. So that's kind of my mindset at the time. And even when I got older, like preteen age, blah, 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 I did resist. I did stop. I didn't eat everything, or I would try to make changes, but she would somehow, even when I was old enough to choose how much to eat and what to eat, I was already in deep trouble with the weight, number one. And number two, I felt that she was trying to kind of sabotage me even when I would try to make dietary changes. Oh, you're just not meant to be thin. Or she would deliberately just act like, I remember once I had tried to like go on like a rice diet or whatever. Then she was like, oh, you're not meant to be thin. Just the constant complaining about that and the constant negativity. And, and, and she never would really allow me to even ever stick to a healthy eating plan, because it was always, she would do it for like one day or 2 days, and then the third day there would just be a bunch of fried food and this, that, and the third, and cakes and stuff, even if you eat a small amount of that, that's still a lot of calories. So it's like, she is almost like, I don't know whether I don't think she was deliberately sabotaging me, or I don't know. Either way, I was being sabotaged when I tried to make a change.
You say that maybe she did, or maybe she didn't know what she was doing, but did your mom like to talk to other people about your weight issues and it being your ex who is the cause of such things? Like, did she use that as a conversation with people all the time?
To be honest with you, yes. I mean, that was kind of in our society, I'm just going to be honest with you, in our society, thinner is considered better, especially for women. So in her, I guess that was her way of saying my genetics were superior. She just didn't get that. My side of the family is not overweight. And that's, I guess that was her way of kind of elevating herself, as if to say, see, this is not my problem. This is, see what I have to put up with, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like if she did it on purpose, it's a weird form of Munchausen by proxy. You know, you're not getting sick per se, but she is feeding you more to create a conversation so she can get sympathy or empathy or a talking point for other people to listen to how much she really hates your dad, whatever that is. If it's done on purpose, like it is kind of a version of that, even though she's not putting you technically in the hospital, but she is, causing you harm mentally by, having this be an issue so she can hammer home to you all the time of how much she dislikes your dad and that the body that you have is a bad body and it came from your dad and I'm good over here, I'm the truth teller of your world. And it has to be very confusing because it is your mom and you want to trust her, but at this age do you still trust her or no?
At this age, I'm starting to see through the cracks and starting to see that a lot of everything she's telling me is not the full on truth. Not that I'm not going to say that she's always intentionally lying. I think a lot of it, maybe she truly did believe, but it was her brain was kind of warped in a way. So it's not like she is a reliable arbiter of truth. Her brain was kind of warped in a way. So you really can't believe everything that she is telling you. Not that she's necessarily always lying, but it's just I think that a lot of times she doesn't even realize what she's doing. And so I did hear that in her household there was, food insecurity. With 6 kids, of course, I imagine that there is some sort of food insecurity. But yeah, I think half of it was like a food insecurity type of thing, and half of it was I'm good over here. Lee is the problem. See what I'm dealing with. I think it's kind of a 50-50 thing. Because she kind of starting to do the same thing with her pets. So I'm like, now to this day, she's starting to do the same thing with her pets. And so I'm starting to believe it's some sort of a food insecurity that she took too far. Her other siblings really didn't have this issue with food, but she took it way too far. Maybe because she was the youngest, she always got the smallest portion or something. It could be that too. I don't know. She's the youngest girl. It could be that too.
So eventually you need to get braces. So what happens from here?
Okay, I had to get braces at about the age of 15. And so my cousin on my mother's side, we'll just call him Mike. He had the exact same tooth issue, like the two front teeth stuck out a bit, and then there was like a space between the two front teeth. And so yeah, so basically he and I had the same issue. But he is the son of Paula, so he does not have any of my father's genetics, but he had the exact same issue. However, my father also had to have braces as a kid. I'm not sure whether he had the same tooth issue or another tooth issue, like maybe the bottom teeth or something with him. I don't know. But my mother still kept saying everything that is wrong with Krystal is Lee's fault. And once again, I am constantly being compared to a person who is a bad person. It's like, let's say you have a mustache or something, and everybody says you look like Hitler with your mustache. It's like you're constantly being compared to a bad or an evil person. And so basically at this point, we were on Medicaid. And of course, Medicaid, there's an approval process with anything with Medicaid, with any insurance really, but I guess more so with government insurance. And so basically she has to do the paperwork and all that. And so she calls my aunt Gina crying about how hard the approval process was and how everything that's wrong with Krystal is Lee's fault. And never mind the fact that her nephew had the same gap and buck teeth problem, and he was a problem of her sister and her husband. He didn't have Lee's genetics at all, and he had the exact same teeth. So I mean, some parents have to pay a lot of money to get their kids braces, really. And she got it basically for free via Medicaid. And was she grateful? Nope. basically she just has this whole attitude, well, they should have made your daddy pay child support, that kind of attitude. And it's just pure delusion. I mean, it's not like I had to have jaw surgery or anything like that. It's just braces for like a year. And she was acting like it was the end of the world. And I remember the day I got them put on, it was this constant complaining, whining, her exaggerating, her making it out to be worse than what it is. And so, and to this day, I just am not really confident with my teeth or my smile, and I'm just not, comfortable with that. People compliment me and say, "Oh, you have nice teeth," blah blah blah, but I still have never really liked my teeth. And the day that I got them on, it was constantly, "Oh my God, do you need Tylenol? Can you eat with that?" Blah blah blah. It's this constant exaggerating, making the situation to be worse than it has to be, even though so many of my peers had to have braces as well. It's like back in the day, if your teeth were not 100% perfect, they didn't look like piano keys or whatever. Back in the day, no one really cared unless you couldn't eat. But by the time I was growing up, braces were a common thing. By the time I was growing up, by the time, it wasn't like in the 50s or whatever where you only really got them if you were to the point where you couldn't eat or whatever like that. When I was growing up, it was common. A lot of my peers, had braces, and it was almost like a rite of passage that she made into a huge deal about absolutely nothing. And I'm like, okay, Medicaid already paid for it. A lot of my friends' parents are paying thousands of dollars. You're still not grateful. You're still complaining. I don't know.
So we've heard a lot here of these things that your mom is doing where it's creating body issues, issues all surrounding, what you look like, which is taking an emotional toll in that way. What are the other things your mom saying about your dad that is, affecting your mental health of how you're feeling about you yourself without the body stuff going on? And do you have examples of situations like that?
Okay, yeah, it was like sometimes the body stuff is takes a backseat to a lot of the other things. Like I remember, like, let's say if I were a child and I was legitimately upset about something, she would just tell my aunts, "Oh, she was just sour. Lee was sour like that." It's like it's not like I could be legitimately upset about something that was legitimately upsetting. It's like, "Oh no, she's just like Lee in this way." And it's just like with the personality, and let's just say like we were talking about something and I had a difference of opinion. And I had a difference of opinion. It was like, "Oh, Lee was like that. There was a part of me that couldn't reach him." And I'm like, "Who died and made you the queen of truth? Who are you to sit there and tell people what the truth is and what they have to believe? You said that you could not reach him. Was he not entitled to his own opinion? Or other people not entitled to their own opinions? If I mean, is it his fault if the person down the street doesn't agree with you?" I mean, I it was just this constant thing about my personality and everything. It was everything. It was all Lee all the time, and there was just this was going on from the time I was a toddler to the time I was an adult.
So, what's gone on here is that your feelings are being dismissed, your thoughts are being dismissed, everything about your inner workings is being minimized. And I guess it sounds like, in very black and white thinking, there's angels and then there's demons. And your dad is considered a demon. And for you, you are being constantly compared to a demon. And no matter what, anyone will say, if you're from birth to whatever age being compared to someone, as you're saying, as a demon, as bad, as their choices are wrong, as everything about them is wrong, everything about that, if you're being compared to that, I assume you then start thinking that you're just a bad person, or inherently, is my assumption, is that even if you don't think it and you're like, I am a good person, it's still in your body, if that makes sense. It's inherently in you, even though you logically know that you're not, but it is there. Is that kind of fair to say?
That's exactly fair to say. It felt like I had a lot of self-esteem issues between the eight after about the age of 9 or 10. I did not want to have school pictures taken. I just was not. Even she said herself after that age, I became quiet and I became sad. So it does affect a person's self-esteem issues and things like that. So
And within that, how are you trying to survive at that point? Like, I guess within your relationship with your mom's telling you you're bad. Are there good times where you get a reprieve? And how are you handling your mom? Because we talked earlier in this and before this call about you being eventually like a parent to her. So can you explain that a little?
but yeah, there were some good times. I feel that she would talk a lot about her past and that I would listen to kind of validate what she was going through and things like that. And it's just, I mean, no 9-year-old should have to hear about your relationship issues. I mean, really, I mean, it's to that point. And I feel that she never really developed any true friendships of people her age. Like she would have acquaintances from work, but it never really would last and things like that. So it's like basically I was hearing about your relationship issues at the age of 9, 10 years old. What am I gonna do about it, you know? And I listened and everything, and I did sympathize. I did feel bad, but at the end of the day, you need someone who is mentally you need a peer to deal with that stuff. You know what I'm saying? And if you don't want to do therapy or you don't have the means to do therapy, I mean, you at least need somebody of your own age to deal with that kind of stuff. And basically, she did, to be fair, she does have sisters and brothers to kind of lean on. But basically, her older sister wouldn't put up with it. She was like, at this point, she was like, look, you got to stop complaining about your ex husband and just go for you and your daughter. That was her attitude towards it. So even though my aunt and I have had our differences, she was right about that. She was dead right about that. And my mother didn't want to hear that. So she really didn't talk to her too much about her issues. You know, she didn't talk to her too much about her issues. As far as my aunt, I'll call her Paula, she's also the type of person who kind of exaggerates and makes things out to be worse than what they are. So a lot of times they would get on the phone and feed on each other and talk about, their relationships and blase blase. So she did have some siblings to lean upon, which is, I guess, a good thing for me because it would have been even worse for me if she did not. But at some point, I think even they were tired of it.
So eventually there was an event where you knew that, this was the beginning of the end and things, from this point on started to slowly but then kind of waterfall itself into, being over as far as the relationship is concerned and low contact would eventually begin. So walk us through this.
Okay, so basically, I'm sure you know what happened with the real estate crash and all that kind of stuff like that. So basically, there's some hard times in this country, and so my mother and I, we lived together during these hard financial times as a young adult. So basically, and we were living in this apartment that was there was a lot of drug activity and all that kind of stuff like that. Drugs, roaches, the usual stuff, and dealing with the projects and the hoods and all that kind of stuff like that. And so basically, one of my aunts, Gina, she said that we could stay with her basically because she owned her own house. And so she basically had this, it was a nice house, it was a large house, and basically we were able to have the whole front of the house, like the way it was set off. It was like, I don't know what they call it, mother-in-law suite or whatever. We were able to have that whole front of the house or whatever. However, we'll just say that Gina was a hoarder. And so basically the place is like filled top to bottom with junk that she doesn't want to get rid of. But she says she would get rid of it. And I was willing to help her get rid of it. And so basically, I was kind of tired of the lies. I was like, okay, we're never going to get to live in there. We just need to deal with what's going on our own and not really depend upon somebody else. And so one day, my mother calls my aunt complaining, about the place that we were living in at that time. And my aunt's like, "Oh, you can live with us, blase, blase." And basically, I just kind of my aunt's on the phone with my mother, and I just kind of roll my eyes. And then my mother comes running behind me and said, "There's good news. She's gonna let us live with us. There's good news." And I just roll my eyes and say, "I don't want to hear it." And so she just tells my aunt, "Oh, Lee was sour like that," even though I had a legitimate reason to be upset because I'm not saying anybody owes anybody anything, but if you're not gonna do something, don't say it. I was tired of the lies and the BS, but once again, I have a bad attitude. I'm just like Lee. And so this may seem like a minor thing, but this was another long episode and another episode and a long list of my aunt, not my aunt, my mother ignoring my feelings and filtering me through the lens of my father. And basically, I was legally an adult, and she still did not have enough sense to see me as I was. Basically, I was just an extension of Lee, and that's all I would ever be to her. That's all that I would ever be to her. She would never have the brain power to separate us and see me for truly for who I was without that lens there. She could always see me through that lens, and that's the way I would always be to her. That's it. And I knew then that I would never basically have the mother that I would have wanted. You know, she didn't really have the emotional intelligence to give me what I wanted, which is just to simply have my feelings recognized and not have to have everything filtered through that lens. So basically, I knew it was over. I would never really have get what I needed from her mentally, and I just pretty much accepted that that's the way it was. That's all I would ever be to her, and those are the breaks. As far as the parent lottery, that's how I ended up. After that, I was, basically getting my stuff together financially and everything like that. Basically, this is when like the emotional stuff abuse kind of kicked in. Like, let's just say I was doing something and she would just come to the house screaming and hollering that the floor hadn't been swept properly or hadn't been swept enough or I didn't do it often enough. I was in the bathroom and she would just run in there screaming that the curtains were open or all this kind of stuff like that. It's just this after that she just started fixating on minor things around the house. And it was just this constant nitpicking, screaming, and if I tried to stand up for myself using religion and the Bible against me. And so that is when I realized, even more so than that's when I realized that she basically was crazy and I had to, fully do the low contact in order to save my own mental health from this constant nitpicking, whining, screaming, religious manipulation. So after that, I got out of there, I became low contact, and that's pretty much what happened with regards to that. During this time period, the way that I felt about her changed more so. Before, comparing me to my father and all that kind of stuff like that, before mainly she was upset, sad. After this, she became like more sadistic and evil. And the the love that I had remaining for her kind of died. And if you were to ask me to this day if I love her, the answer is no. Like I wish I could, but there's like a hole there, a love-shaped hole there that is like a black hole and is empty. It's just it went from just being the sad, lonely, depressed about Lee woman to just being sadistic, mean, cruel. Wasn't enough. It wasn't I didn't do it right. I didn't do it fast enough. I didn't do it often enough. The goalposts were always moving just because I don't know, I guess the house was an extension of herself and she wasn't happy with herself. The goalpost was constantly moving, and it's just, I don't know what really happened to her mentally during that time period, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for ourselves. Basically, my feelings now are that I'm kind of indifferent towards her. And it's just like, in life, we all have to lie in the beds that we have made. And, that goes for me, that goes for her, that goes for everybody. And as far as when she is old and sick or whatever, she's not living with me. She can rot in a Medicaid infested, roach infested nursing home for all I care. She has proven that she cannot be trusted to not be toxic. And after everything that I've been through and all the crap that I have been through with her, due to her and my father's choices, is about me now. I mean, I don't care how bad it sounds. My father is already dead, so that's just one problem down the drain. And recently I told her straight up that I was not having children and why. And it's just like thanks to her crap, I've never felt comfortable enough with myself or liked myself well enough to want to pass on my genetics. And she tried to backtrack, lie, BS and all of that, but I held firm because she's not going to gaslight me. I know what happened. You're trying to backpedal now because you don't want me to make that choice. And as far as the having kids, mentally I can't de mentally, I can't deal with it, and I'm not gonna play games with other people's lives. They say that the boys are like their moms and girls are like their dad. I mean, I've heard that before. Basically, I probably would just die inside if the labor and delivery nurse presented me with a kid and it looked like me, I probably would just die inside, you know? The way I look at it, I'm not going to keep willingly bringing branches into an already messed up family tree. And it ends with me. I'm in too many pieces mentally to fully do right by that kid, and I refuse to mess up any more lives. And in life, we all have to lie in the bed that we have made, and that's all there is to it, you know? I'm not going to play games with anybody else's life. I already have too many mental issues to deal with that. And it wouldn't be fair to the kid.
So you're putting an end to intergenerational trauma by, not having kids or extending it because you need to do you. So, before we get to like words of wisdom or anything like that, when it comes to all of the programming that was given to you when you were younger and now trying to untangle all of that, where did you begin and what does your day to day look like as someone who's like living for yourself, maybe not trying to care what other people say, even though those things will affect you? Like, how are you able to interact with the world now? And has it gotten better or has it still been very difficult?
It has been difficult. It has been difficult to truly connect with people. It has been difficult to truly connect with people. I feel that especially for us talking with other people about your trauma or your life or whatever, even with therapists and stuff, I feel that there's kind of mothers are kind of like the sacred cows or whatever. And it's like, you cannot say anything negative about them. Oh, she did the best she could. Oh, this, that, and the third. There are a lot of excuses made from others. And it's like no one really wants to hear the truth if you had a mother who didn't do what she was supposed to do as a mother. So it's difficult to talk to people about that trauma because they don't want to hear it. It's like a cultural thing with us. We don't want to hear it. So, but I've been trying to, I just been, living my life without worrying about other people. I just have been trying to be mindful, being in the moment, trying to, it's hard, but I just have been just living life, moving forward. And I try to be fair with people. I try to be fair with people. I try to give a person the benefit of the doubt. I don't immediately just come out guns blazing. Oh, they must have do this. They must do that. I try not to, just like she was seeing everything through the lens of my father. I try not to see everybody through her lens. I'm like, okay, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, try to be kind to people, things like that, you know.
And who would you say you are right now? And what would you say to the younger version of yourself in this era to make them feel a little bit better?
Right now, I'm a musician, I'm an animal lover, I volunteer with animals, and I would say that right now I'm a decent person. I try to leave this world better than it was before I came here. And I would tell my younger self that you got to consider the source, before you immediately believe what someone is saying or whatever. You got to consider the source. Is that person mentally healthy enough for you to listen to? Like, you have to consider the source before you internalize a lot of things about yourself. And it's like, I don't, I don't know. Yeah, I think that I'm a good person and I'm trying to, leave the world better than it was before I found it. So that's all I can continue to do is keep moving forward and to keep pushing forward.
And you mentioned your music there. So has that been a big part of your healing process?
Yeah, that has been a big part of my healing process. Basically, I wrote the whole EP, Lady Sisyphus, when I was living with her. And then I wrote the album Sugar Free after I had left, and was living on my own. And the majority of the songs on each album, like, had to do with her and her toxicity. And the music was a good way to like process my thoughts and my feelings and to turn lemons into lemonade. And I really recommend that other victims of narcissists use whatever gifts they have, whether it's musical, art, or whatever, to kind of process their pain and turn it into something that the narcissist cannot ruin for them. That's the way I feel about it. You gotta kind of process your pain and turn it into something good. That's what I would recommend for anybody, whether it's journaling, drawing, painting, music, anything. Try to have something that they cannot take from you and to use your pain into making something good. That's my advice to anybody.
So you found this show through the subreddit on Reddit, Raised by Narcissists. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience kind of through there and the validation that you got from other people and how that was, like interacting with that kind of community, and how you feel about communities like those?
Those communities on social media are a very valuable resource, raised by narcissists, and the other one, which is called, I believe it's called Exchange Adult Children. I believe that's the second one. And those subreddits are just a wealth of information. You feel that you finally get to see that you're not alone and that you're not crazy and that you're not the problem. The parent is not always right. You get to see a lot of these things and in real time and know that you're not alone. They have been very helpful to me just to read and to see everybody else's responses and just to know that you're not alone. You know what I'm saying? That is very helpful. I mean, it's sad that other people are going through it, but it's also it helps you to know that you're not the only one going through it.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
My advice is that you have to put yourself first. I mean, a lot of times we are taught that it is selfish, that is mean, and that is cruel, but we have got to do what we have to do to survive, and we can't show up for the world if we do not do something for ourselves, put ourselves first sometimes. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You have to know when to walk away, regardless of what society is telling you, religion is telling you, whatever you got to do, you have to know when to walk away, you know. And in my experience, people really people really don't change unless they want to, and rarely do they want to because they're getting something out of things as the way they keeping things the way they are. So they kind of don't want to change because they're getting something out of it by keeping it the way that it is. So my advice is just sometimes you just have to walk away for your own sanity. People don't change, and you either can decide whether you're willing to put up with that or whether you're willing to put yourself first. It's up to you, but at the end of the day, we're all responsible for ourselves, and we should not have to set ourselves on fire in order to keep other people warm.
Well, Crystal, I really want to thank you for being here. I don't think we've ever had a story before where, the child became or was labeled, bad because of the relationship with the ex. We might have, but I just don't remember. But nothing as clear cut as this, as the child is being reminded that they are a bad person because, of the relationship breakup and them feeling maybe abandoned or invalidated by that person leaving, and that you become the receptacle of all of that person's pain, and everything is taken out on you in a horrible way that you don't deserve. And I'm sorry that this happened to you. I'm happy you're here to share this with others who have gone through the same thing, because it's something that we've really not touched upon that much. So, a big thank you to that. I know everyone listening is giving you a big hug, and just happy you're living your life for you. And, it's a good message for a lot of people, and that some people might say, "Oh, you never got to the point where you wanted to have kids of your own." But you know what you are capable of, and you know you've been a parent. You've dealt with, at a certain point you have to be able to, you know, be your own person, and you don't want to pass any of that on, and go through this whole entire healing process to be the best human being you can be for you, but for the world. It's not like you're not making an impact on the world and other people, just because you didn't have children. because you have those people out there that will say weird things like that. But I'm just proud of you. You're doing good, and I'm happy that you're here and sharing your story and getting it out there. And hopefully this helps you a lot and maybe puts an end to this kind of stuff by getting it out of there and just kind of being a citizen of the world and helping people heal.
At times, it's very healing to talk about it. So, I mean, I'm glad that I was able to come on here and talk, and maybe some other people can identify with what I'm saying. So, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Krystal, for being our guest today. And if you want to be a guest like Krystal was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. Also, at our website, we have a support group. So if you need support, we have a support group at narcissistapocalypse.com, and you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. It is a wonderful group of people in there, and you can make a lot of friends too. So if you need support, join our support group today. And if you need even more support, please do visit our friends at domesticshelters.org. At domesticshelters.org, they have articles and resources to help you make sense of everything that you're dealing with. And they have every phone number, email address, web address for shelters and agencies. And no matter how big or small the town you're in, domesticshelters.org has it there. So if you need extra support, please do go to domesticshelters.org. And we have friends of the show called Shelter Movers, everyone, and Shelter Movers can be found at sheltermovers.com. And what they do is they help you move all of your stuff from your home into storage, and that can be your pets and livestock too. So if you're trying to get out of domestic violence and coercive control and you need help leaving the home and getting all of your stuff out of your home and into storage, sheltermovers.com can help you, and they can help you also get your pets and livestock out too. And they are only available in Canada, and it is a donor-supported charitable organization. So if you need help from them or just want to donate to them, go to sheltermovers.com. And that is it for today's survivor story, for today's episode. So for myself and Krystal, we hope you have a good night.